Welcome back to another episode of Kicking It with Coach Red, where we bring you all the news, stories, takes, and opinions about your favorite teams from the Pacific North, fresh from the good to the bad to the Mariners.
The sweet, sweet Mariners, baby.
Mariners got some good news this
Great
week.
news.
They are going in a 3 game set in August. They're going to make all the nosebleed tickets $51. Great news for the owners. Why would they do that? It's because Ichiro Suzuki was first ballot Hall of Famer, missed it by one vote from being unanimous. We're going to talk about Ichiro and his induction. Then we're going to talk about this upcoming season for the Mariners, a couple of best case, worst case scenarios. But before we do that, why don't I tell you a little bit about us? If you're looking for a guy that's when it comes to hosts on this podcast, first ballot Hall of Famer, just like King Griffey Jr., just like Ichiro, first ballot, near unanimous. If anyone else is doing that, I'm calling for their head too. If you're looking for a guy like that, you're looking for a guy like me, your boy, Coach Red. You can find me on X at the real Coach Red, on Instagram at the real underscore Coach Red, TikTok at the real Coach Red. Also find the show over on YouTube. Search Kicking It with Coach Red. Like, subscribe, hit the bell notifications, and leave a comment or two. If you're looking for a guy that he could go down as a Hall of Famer, but it's going to take a little bit of time. He needs to build up that rapport. He needs to get those numbers generated, just like Edgar Martinez did. Sometimes you got to let things simmer. You got to let them marinate. You got to wait a decade until, you know, ready to really go into the Hall. We're a few years in. Let's see if he can make it. It's Cain.
Yeah, I'm Kane. There's a horrendous introduction. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Um,
I said that you're a potential Hall of Famer.
sure. Yeah, you can
Sorry.
find me over on Twitter at K2406, TikTok K0624. Also follow the show's socials over on Twitter and Instagram at Coach Red Pod. Balls. Do it. Freaking do it.
Um, Ichiro going in is a big deal with
Oh, 100%.
the hits that he amassed in his time. And if you're just looking at MLB hits, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. Anyways, if you throw in, because he started in Major League Baseball at 27 years old, and
Yes,
he
he
came
did.
in lights on fire, rookie
What,
of the year.
third year in? He's the all-time hit leader in a single season in
Yes,
2004. He set the single season hit record, uh, 10-time Gold Glover, batting champ galore, Silver Slugger. The dude was a magician in right field, and really was a very, very bright spot for the Mariners for a very, very, very long time, and still is worshipped in that build.
yes. And I'm going to say something that could be a little controversial. Do I think that Ichiro is first ballot Hall of Famer? Yes. Do I think he should have been unanimous? Yes. Do I hold Ichiro in the same light as other Mariners greats? No, I do not.
No,
And the reason being, when he came into the league, it was 2001, was magical season, all stars galore. This guy was the toast of the town. He's got the laser beam throw. He gets on base at a high clip. He's stealing bases left and right. But then when the team started to not make the playoffs anymore, not be as competitive, you needed Ichiro to become more than just a singles merchant. You know, talking to a buddy today, there's stories from Jamie Moyer where he put 5 consecutive balls in BP off the Hit It Here Cafe. That's big power. And everyone said he had the power, but he was trying to get on base. That was what his game was built on. During years 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 with the Mariners, when he was not batting in the leadoff spot, moved down to the 3 spot because he could hit some guys in, being able to produce a little bit more power to give the team a better chance to win than just the individual stats, I would have appreciated. But that doesn't take away from what he's done to the city and what he's done for this organization after his playing time. It was great. He wanted to come back, retire as a Mariner, did it over in Japan. This is a guy that's been around the team. He's in he's in full uniform all the time. He's around these guys, beloved, all of these things. Yes, I love Ichiro, but he doesn't hold that place in my heart like Edgar Martinez does, like Ken Griffey Jr. does, like Kyle Seager does, like Felix Hernandez does, like Jay Buhner even does. And in real, if we're talking real, these are some of the guys that I have a softer spot in my Mariners heart than Ichiro. And I know that that is a horrendous take for some people. Some people, worship the ground he walks on. And I do think that he is an amazing player. I just think for what the Mariners needed during that time, he didn't bring that spark. It was good to tune in, but when the Mariners were floundering, I wasn't tuning in just to watch Ichiro. I just wasn't tuning in.
Mm. Uh, I feel a little bit different about him. Uh,
He's more
because
your era than mine.
yeah, and and that's you got Edgar a lot longer than
Oh,
me.
lucky me.
Um, I got some of Griffey, but
You
just
got Reds Griffey.
yeah, and then older back on the Mariners Griffey. But from the stories that you and Dad had always told me and all the videos I've seen, right, that Griffey is just top dog in every Mariners fan's heart. And Ichiro for me, watching him as a young kid, right? You coached me before. I tried to swing like him. I tried to play like him. Ichiro was awesome. And for me, he just holds a little bit more of a special place in my heart than most, just because he was, you know, a guy they took a chance on and it worked out for the most part,
They didn't
right?
take a chance on him. He was like the highest touted
Yeah.
international guy. At the time, he was
Yes.
like the first international, from Japan position player that they actually thought could make it. He paved the way
Yes,
for
for
Shohei Otani,
for everybody.
for
But
all for because pitchers had made the move before and had
right.
varying degrees of success, but a
Mhm.
position player hadn't prior to Ichiro.
And just what he did was crazy, right? Just
What he did for how long he did it too. I mean,
yeah,
he was playing into his 40s.
constantly at 200 plus hits a season. Um
Crazy stat is like after his third at or it wasn't third, it was like fourth or fifth at bat in the bigs. His batting average never dipped below 300 after that.
Yeah, it was insane. I believe he was like a 340 something career average. Um, just as coach said, it's super special to the city, super special to the organization. And he did pave the way for a lot of these star players now that you've seen come out of Japan. And he is highly regarded here, highly regarded across the entire league. Um,
And in Japan, they
and
still
in
love him.
Japan. So hats off to Ichiro Suzuki. Congratulations on
And
getting
he's
into
the
the Hall
king.
of Fame.
He's the king of obscure stats too, right? Like, okay, yes, he has the single season record for most hits in a season. He also has an in the park home run in an
The
all-star
All-Star
game,
game. Yeah, that
right?
was
It's just those weird things that he was able to do. And this guy is an obscure stat guy's like wet dream, right?
mm-hmm.
And he did produce one of the better Dave Niehaus calls when he threw that guy out at third. He's like, it's Star Wars.
Yeah.
That thing was a missile
Also, big shout out to the Mariners on retiring his number. And
immediately.
yeah, and I actually had a conversation about this with somebody at work today. And I was like, nah, it's super awesome. Like, I'm glad the duty's like, well, kind of makes you think, like, kind of sucks to be Randy Johnson then. And it's like, Randy wanted out. Like,
That's not even why I would say that. I saw some things where people like they should double retire the number and put Ichiro and Randy Johnson. There's a big difference there.
well, Randy
E-
went in
As a
as a
Diamondback,
Diamondback. Yeah.
Ichiro's going in as a Mariner. So if you want your number retired, by the team, maybe you should go in. Or there have been a handful of players that played for a bevy of teams that, didn't have a logo on their app. If that's what he wanted to do, I would have taken. And it's not like I don't like Randy Johnson. I got to see prime Randy and got to see him even perform well later this year. Still had, a good feelings, good thoughts about him. But
Mhm.
at the same time, when you look at it, when it was like, all right, or it could have been like the dual hat guy, right? No, he said, I'm going in as a Diamondback. And at that point, I was like, well, your number is not getting retired by the
Yeah,
Mariners.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, since we're feeling so good about Ichiro, why don't we talk about the upcoming season? And we're going to start off with worst case scenarios. Kane and I both have three things, and there's going to be a handful of things that are going to be a little bit more realistic. There's going to be things that are a little bit more hopeful or less than hopeful on the negative side. We'll kind of flush it out. We'll talk about each one's. You can explain yours. I'll explain mine. If you want to, we can talk about it. It's our podcast, so we can do whatever we want. We're
True.
adults. We're
True.
adults. We can do whatever we want. All right, Kane. What is your first worst
So
case scenario?
my first worst case is, we've had the looming of trading Luis Castillo over our heads for the past month and a half now. Uh, and my first one would be, if you do trade Castillo and you trade away two pitchers from this starting rotation, and that's tough.
I think that's when you're talking about worst case scenarios. Like, I don't know how the Mariners would feasibly do that, especially at this
Right,
point
right. Like, because like
in the cycle.
we've talked that, and this is just a bunch of stuff I've also heard from, like sports guys on the internet, right?
Yeah, I follow
Probably
those
who
guys. I
know,
follow sports guys.
probably knows a little bit more than I do about the inner workings of stuff. And this is off of like foul territory, stuff like that, like legitimate shows. Um, but if you trade Luis Castillo, you're fine, right? Because you still have Emerson Hancock, and we've said from for years,
You
right?
hate Emerson
I
Hancock.
do hate Emerson Hancock, but you keep telling me, damn it, that we're gonna be fine if he's our fifth starter. So
It's
guess
true.
what?
It's
I'm
true.
I'm rolling with it, right? I even said it today, but I'm rolling with it, right? Because again, we are so lucky to have the starting staff that we have to be consistently called in the top five of starting rotations in the league.
They're right now
They're number two.
with Roki going to the Dodgers. They're top three, and they're not three, and they're not two. They're still number one because there are a ton of
Yeah,
injury concerns with the Dodgers rotation, and there are a lot less with the Mariners rotation.
right. But I've also heard that to get more production on this team offensively, you would have to trade a second starter most likely to get, a younger guy who has control to get more MLB good hitters on this team against their will, right? Because
Okay.
people don't want to sign here, and that shows, right? The Mariners also aren't overly aggressive in the market, but even after guys they go up, they don't want to come here. It's kind of concerning at this point. So you might as well trade for people who don't have a choice in the matter.
Yeah.
It's not a great idea, but it's also been thrown out there. And I think like if you have to trade, you know, George Kirby, Logan Gilbert, Bryce Miller, or Brian Wu after the jump that Brian Wu and Bryce Miller took last year. I don't want them off the team. I don't want George off the team. And I sure as shit don't want Logan off this team because he is the best pitcher that we have on staff.
Okay. I can,
So,
I feel you.
you got anything else to add to that, maybe? Or,
No, we'll go to mine.
all right, what's yours, coach?
My first worst case, because we didn't really communicate this and run it by each other beforehand. My first worst case scenario is that you do trade Castillo right now to free up some dollars. You get a marginal hitter, but you're trying to get cash savings to go after another player, and that player is not to be found. Like the money goes for nothing. And although the ownership group would probably extremely love this idea because there are a handful of impact players still on the market, especially offensively. And even when you look at some of the bullpen pieces, and I really think that with this whole thing, Castillo's market is going to, it's really going to come down to Jack Flaherty and where he decides to sign and what those numbers look like, right? Because I think that Castillo and Flaherty, they're similar in age, and Flaherty had a big year last year. Luis
Mhm.
Castillo had a down year from what he has done, but is still above average for most starters in the league. So when you look at the outlook going forward, I would still have Castillo as a more attractive piece than Jack Flaherty. If Jack Flaherty signs for at or near Luis Castillo money, I think that you're going to see a handful of teams that miss out on Roki, Flaherty, Corbin Burns, uh, dude that went to Spencer Strider.
No. Spencer
No,
Strider's under control, big guy.
no, Max Freed.
Uh, yeah, it was Max Fried. There's a
Yeah,
couple pitchers that got similar contracts to what
sure.
Castillo's getting now. The A's paid a pitcher similar to Castillo's contract. I believe the
Luis
Mets.
Servino. Uh,
Yeah, and then
when we're
Sean
talking
Manaea got
about
an
those guys,
extension.
obviously Corbin Burns is head and shoulders above. But when you look at that next group, I think Luis Castillo fits in just fine. So
Mhm.
waiting for the market to bear what it did for the starters and then making the move puts you in a tough spot. Could you get a better prospect package? Perchance. But if you're also doing it to save some money to go aggressively pursue someone and you don't end up with that someone, that would be worst case for me.
That's fair. That's fair.
That's why I didn't pile on yours because mine was similar.
All right. All right.
All right. What was your second worst case scenario?
I think having multiple hitters near the Mendoza line this year because
By hitters, you mean starters,
yes, yes, not just guys who get,
injury reps, or
yeah,
funneled up and
just
down between like a late inning bench guy. You're talking about your top 11 guys.
yeah, because what Mitch Garver gave us last year was not very fun, and
That ain't it.
He hit near the Mendoza line. I mean, JP's average fell like down to 211, I believe. Josh Rojas fell to 200. Demos fell. I mean, a lot
Mitch
more
Haniger,
people were hitting near 200 than they were 250, right? And that's a problem. And if this trend continues, right, you're not going to be one of those teams that is, oh, even though you have the worst average in the league, you're first place in the division again. Like, you got to put up stats this year because everybody else has made moves. So, having like six or seven of your hitters near the Mendoza line is not very good. So, that's really all I got there. So, Coach Red, what is your second worst case scenario?
when you look at what the Mariners have done so far to address their bullpen, they've kind of looked at guys with stuff that they think they can get in the lab and try to catch lightning in a bottle, like they have with Steckenrider, Paul Sewald, Colin Snyder. These are all guys that were kind of thrown into the lab and came out smelling like roses. Without making that impact move, I feel like this team is banking on good things out of Matt Brash and Gregory Santos. My worst case scenario is that Brash and Santos still aren't completely healthy and don't regain the form that they showed when we traded for Santos and what Brash really was in that first full season in the bullpen. because the guy is dynamite. He's your pivot guy. With the addition of Santos into this, you can move him back to that pivot guy. He's not having to work as a straight setup guy. He's not having to work in as a closer, barring injuries. But I think the worst case for the Mariners is that some of those guys don't hit. They made some very intriguing moves over the course of the last couple of weeks. You're also looking at Kowser coming back, who was injured in spring
Yes.
training, who had a very
Dude,
strong
looked
spring.
fantastic.
So, and then you've got other arms like Vargas who didn't make it up. There's a guy that we left off our initial 26 in that first one, and Bizardo, who actually kind of turned it around. But when you don't have a lot of your veteran guys on here, aren't the guys with the best stuff. Your stuff guys are your younger guys. Your stuff
Yep.
guys that we see on this team right now are, Troy Taylor. You're looking at Andres Munoz, you're looking at Matt Brash and Gregory Santos. All these guys are under 27 years old. So you don't have a veteran piece. And there were guys like after Tanner Scott signs with the Dodgers, like a guy that I would have loved to have in this bullpen is Kirby Yates. And then he
Yep.
turns and goes to the Dodgers. So without being able to go make that impact signing, and with Paul Sewald signing today for 7 mil with the Guardians, like the bigger name guys aren't necessarily there anymore. So you didn't make the move there. You're relying on your things. And I think your laurels and what you've done traditionally over the last handful of years, if Brash and Santos do not get back to where they're at, I think it's going to be tougher to weather this storm, even though you have a similar cast of characters. But Thornton's not any younger. Spire regressed last year. It's Sauce isn't getting any younger. Like these are all guys that I think can play important key roles on this team. I think that Sauce is one of the best glue guys and one of the best hometown guys that has been around this team in a long, 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 long time. And
Yeah.
his interaction with fans and local media like us podcasters, he's awesome. And
Mm-hmm.
he's what you embody. But when you look at Brash and Santos, they bring a little bit more in terms of stuff to the table. And if
Yep.
that stuff's not there, even if they're there and they're struggling to refine that stuff, that's going to hurt a lot more than if they aren't there and on the IR.
All right. It's pretty
Whew,
bad.
that
That
was a
is the
rant.
worst. That is a somewhat scary scenario.
Yeah, it's a worst case scenario.
All
All right. What's your third worst case scenario?
right, this one takes the icing, and it's not even coming close to the playoffs, right? Last year we had the 10-game lead that we lost, and then it came down to the final game, like it did the year prior. And it's just like you're sitting, as we've said, like on the edge of your seat almost every game. And if they don't even come close, like we've discussed this, it's a you have to win your division because the wild card is too good. Most of the teams from the AL East are most likely gonna be in, and a team you throw in from the Central too. Uh, so really the West comes down to who wins the division, and you know Astros have made
It's
moves,
as open as it's been.
right? And if you can hopefully be in that top echelon, but if you're third or fourth this year, 8 to 10 games out, that's not good. That's not the direction you want to be in. And I think as fans, we would all sit there and just rage at ownership once again, and Jerry Dipoto and Hollander just being like, "What are we doing? Why are we being the mediocre again?"
I
When
don't
we
think
tasted the postseason for the first time.
I think that it would be initial rage, but then it would move to indifference and they would lose fandom from that.
Oh, 100%, because like they've the fans have dealt with this for so long and have been so loyal. But to get that sweet, sweet taste of the postseason and how much they battled in that to be competitive in those, like they were wasting the opportunity of this starting staff for one. You're wasting Cal Raleigh. You're wasting Julio Rodriguez by not getting them the help that they need. Yes, you've made some moves in the right direction with Randy extending Victor Robles, who we can hope recuperate what he did last year or
Replicate.
replicate. Sorry, words are hard. You hope that JP bounces back, Mitch Garver bounces back, but you're in this hole of what if. And just to avoid this, go sign Pete Alonso. Just do
The
it.
this team specifically is just when you play in the margin for error is a lot bigger. They're
Yep.
not making those moves to go get people. It's not like it was with the Mets a few years back when they spent all the money, got Verlander, got Scherzer, realized it wasn't working, shipped them out, were able to rebuild a little bit quicker than most anticipated and made a deep playoff run. The Mariners are living in the margins. They're trying to bridge the gap to their young hitters coming up, and you've got to do that effectively. And if you have similar years or regressions from some people, some of those people outplaying their baseball card might not be enough to overcome the totality of the whole.
So that is my last worst case is just not even coming close. I think we would all not be very happy if that happened. So Coach Red, what is your final worst case scenario?
I up your not being close to the playoffs with missing the playoffs by one game. I swear to God, if the Mariners miss the playoffs by one game again, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself because I consider myself an optimistic fan. The
Yes.
Mariners have played solid, if not heart attack inducing play over the last couple of years. Like, I have to stay engaged because I don't know what's going to happen for better or for worse, right? So
Yeah.
I'm an optimistic person, but when you look at the Mariners over the course of the last 4 seasons that they hadn't made the playoffs, I think they've missed the playoffs by a total of 5 games.
They
If
have.
they go in and miss 5 playoffs by a total of 6 games, I'm going to lose my freaking mind because I know that large sweeping changes aren't going to happen where the pocketbooks are going to be open, right? It's going to be draft, develop, trade, trade established players for controllable guys that could be on the cusp. We've seen this play out a little bit. You've seen that when, early Mitch Haniger, you're looking at JP Crawford is a guy that was part of a deal. You saw bits and pieces with Rojas, sure. But when you get into going and making those plays for guys, it's tougher when you're right there. My selling pitch was, hey, if you're on this team, we're over that hump, no problem. But apparently, they're not as good a salesman as I am to these impending free agents. So I think that missing by one game would hurt me way, way, way more. It hurt me down to my core more than if they fell out of contention and stayed out of contention.
That's fair. I think both sides are equally as frustrating. Um, because with mine, it's just you have all this talent and you didn't do anything, and you didn't like. What did you think running the a worse opening day lineup? Well, I wouldn't call it worse. I guess I would call it average. I guess.
Yeah,
Was it a?
that's
Is
a
it a
better
little?
thing. It's not worse than the opening day lineup last
Sure,
year,
but it's just like
but they won on opening day.
sure, but just the lack of moves and stuff too. It'd just be like I wouldn't be surprised if they lost by one or were out of the playoffs by one game or by 10. I wouldn't be surprised from the lack of moves that have happened. So,
All right, let's turn these frowns upside down.
yeah, let's do
Now
that.
we're gonna go into some best case scenario type stuff. Kane, what's your first best case scenario?
So I'm gonna flip some of mine around because I figured one of them should go at the bottom, right?
Okay.
Uh, so I'm gonna start with Julio actually starting the season hot, or not hot, just how he should normally hit. And I do think that Kevin Seisler and Edgar Martinez can get him right earlier. You saw late in the
He's
season,
traditionally been a slow starter though.
yeah, traditionally, but I think that those two can really work with him. And get him going early. Let's not forget that Seisler has worked with other great young talents, aka Ronald Acuna Jr. uh, I think that they can get Julio to where he needs to be way sooner and right out the gate, honestly, because I think that's also what this team needs is Julio to be the catalyst that he is. They need him at his peak from the get go,
When
and to just
we've said this for the last couple of years since Julio made his debut. Typically, as Julio, if Julio Rodriguez is hot, this team's winning games.
yeah, 9 times out of 10 they are, yes, and if you can get Julio to just be an average hitter, I think, to start the year.
To start the year, they're talking the whole year. Like that ain't gonna
No,
play.
no, no, no. No, be an average hitter to start the year. This team is already in a better position than it was last year. I really think that because Julio is the catalyst of this offense. It's him and Cal. It's him and Cal. Let's be honest here. So that is my first best case scenario is Julio just blazing the trail this year. Kind of putting up a Bobby Witt Jr. season as Bobby Witt did last year.
Oh.
So, Coach Red, what is your first best case scenario?
Sign Pete Alonso.
Yeah,
So
his market's crashed.
there's no market right now. Like the market they're saying is the Blue Jays while they're trying to work on an extension for Vladdy. And I think if Vladdy's signing the extension, he's not saying, sure, bring in Pete Alonso. I'll play third base for a couple of years. He doesn't want to do that.
No,
So
and here's another thing too. If you sign Pete Alonso, they can't even get him now. They just signed Anthony Santander.
exactly, they're running up against numbers, and then the numbers you're going to throw at Vladdy are going to be big as well.
Mm-hmm.
So with Pete Alonso, what I think is it reinvigorates us as fans. It makes this slow off season seem like it was a little bit more than it was. A lot of the frustration vanishes. This is a guy who I view as a similar player to Cal Raleigh. They're going to rely on power and clutch, right?
Yep.
He's not going to give you a ton defensively, but he is a higher average hitter than Cal Raleigh. His power numbers are very similar to Cal Raleigh, if not better. Cal Raleigh's a little bit more clutch with the RBIs, but throwing these two guys in the middle of your lineup makes
60
your
home runs,
lineup
I'll
a
take
lot
it.
scarier, right? You're
Yeah.
running guys like when Robles is hot or JP's hot, one of those guys at the top of the lineup, and then you got Julio, Cal, Pete Alonso, Randy Arozarena. You throw in wild card Luke Rayleigh in there too. Like
That's pretty nasty if you ask me.
it's very solid. And then you've got your other pieces that are more your base hit speed guys as your Donovan Solano being your base hit guy. And then looking at your Demos, Ryan Bliss, JP, Robles as your kind of speed catalyst guys.
Mhm.
And this guy's extremely marketable. He's
Yeah.
multiple time home run champ. He carries himself with the swagger, beloved by Mets fans. This
Yeah.
guy is a guy that is well respected. And I think you can get him, especially with the leaks coming out about what the Mets were offering, 3 years, 70 mil with opt outs because they didn't want to commit to him long term. I do think a 3-year deal is going to be the sweet spot with the opt outs. And I think for the Mariners, they're going to probably have to look at something above, you know, 70 mil. It's probably going to have to be closer to 75. If you can structure it 25 mil a year with opt outs, hey, guess what? If he has a huge year, he's going to opt out and then you can reallocate those resources for the following year.
Yep.
If he plays average and doesn't see the market drumming up, he's on your team again. Great.
Yeah. I'm here for it. I mean, you give me two guys in the middle of my lineup that it's combined at least 60 home runs a year.
You're
Sure.
probably looking at closer to 70 to 80 between the two.
Well, sure. And then you add Julio in there, and it's just,
And Randy,
whoo, yeah. I'm, if I do hope this happens because there is no market. Mets said no, we don't want you. They signed Jesse Winker and Tyler or AJ Minter to allocate the funds that they were going to spend on Pete Alonso this year, and then the Blue Jays went and signed Santander. So there's really not a lot of first base needy teams. I mean, the Yankees just went and got Paul Goldschmidt, right? That's Pete Alonso. If they didn't get Goldschmidt, Pete Alonso would be great for them, but he has nowhere to go.
Yeah, there's a few places that he could go, but then those teams are probably then moving off their incumbent starters. Like a couple of teams out of California, the Angels would then move off of Shonenwell. And then if let's say he went to like the Giants, then they're having to move on Lamont Wade Jr. I would take either of those guys in a combo at first base with Luke Raley as well. So, but I'd want Luke Raley to go play the outfield. And then Dominic Canzone is not on this roster to start the year. And Luke Raley is your power hitting lefty that can get DH at bats. He can play in the field. He's very good defensively. He can give Pete a blow at first base. Best case scenario is go. You don't have to give up any prospects for him either. You just go
Oh,
sign him.
yeah, yeah. I think they totally should.
All right. Kane, what is your second best case scenario?
So my second best case scenario. So we're gonna have three pitchers in the top eight for Cy Young this year, and it could be a bevy of them, right? I do think Logan is one of them. I think Brian Wu is one of them, and Bryce Miller is one of them. And my dark horse, if one of them were to win it, it would be Bryce Miller this year. But I think you're gonna have four in the top 10. I know that because Kirby's gonna find a way to get into the top 10. But to have three in the top eight is bananas. And I think either three have a good shot at winning it.
Okay.
Got anything else to add?
Nope.
All right. Coach Red, what's your second best case scenario?
Since we're talking about accolades, I guess I can talk about mine now. Um, this one is like a three-part answer. It's gonna be a little long. First thing is 5 Mariners make the All-Star game. 3 pitchers, 2 position players. The 2 position players being Julio Rodriguez and Cal Raleigh making his first appearance.
Yes.
When I look at the pitchers, 2 guys I think that I have in here have already made all-star teams, and that is George Kirby and Andres Munoz. And then my last pitcher would be a first-time participant in an all-star game, and that's the guy that you highlighted. It is Bryce Miller, because what
Yes.
Bryce Miller did down the stretch, I think, is extremely overlooked. He started off a little bit slow, following a little bit rockiness after his first couple starts of his rookie season. But this guy was one of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball, if not the best pitcher, the second half of the season. The numbers don't
Yes.
lie.
I mean, he figured out how to pitch on the road. I mean, that was the big thing is he could pitch at home, no problem. But once we got a road trip, it was like, oh, what Bryce Miller are we getting today?
Yeah, and let's just keep going. I think that Bryce Miller finishes top 3 in Cy Young voting.
Yeah.
Top 3, which is kind of what you alluded to, because when you look at the health that he has shown overall, comparative to a younger starter like Brian Wu, and I do like the stuff that you have with Kirby and Logan Gilbert, and even with Luis Castillo. It's great stuff. They have a bigger bevy of pitches that they throw. But when you look at the fastball splitter combo that Bryce Miller brings out as a starter, it's a phenomenal combination, right?
Yes, it
And what that
is.
splitter was able to do is help neutralize lefties, because his big problem was lefties. He's been able to neutralize that. Yes, you have another offseason, but the dude pitchers are always tweaking stuff in the lab, right? They're always
Mm-hmm.
trying to find that next edge. Maybe it's a different grit, maybe it's a new pitch that you introduce this year, like Bryce did last year. And if he can build upon the success that he had, I think that top three in the Cy Young is not out of the question. And I'm going to double it down because I say that Julio is the top three MVP candidate. You're going to have a handful of guys that he is going against: Aaron Judge, Bobby Witt Jr. I'll throw Jose Ramirez in there. I'll
Can't forget about
even,
J Ram.
and there was another guy that I thought of, but I lost it.
Devers.
No, I'm not throwing Devers in there. I don't think that he's there. Gunnar Henderson is who I was
Nah,
going to say.
that's a good one.
So I think that Julio is an emerging star, right? It's going to
Yes.
come down to, like you said earlier, how he starts the season. If he can start off a little bit hotter, and if the Mariners are winning, Julio's going to be the face of it, right? You're going to have
Yes.
Julio and Cal that are kind of the commanders, and then you're going to have the five horsemen, which is the starting rotation right behind him. And
Yeah.
but Julio's the guy that ignites the team. When he's hot, they're hot. And if the
Okay.
Mariners do what we think they can do, not that they will or what they should or what they might, what they can do is they can be an extremely good team. This can be 100-win team with the rotation, what it
Yes.
is. And if Julio gets hot, we saw it 2 years ago in that month of August where Julio batted almost 500. The Mariners lost like 4 games in the month of August.
Mm-hmm. And it was a big storm back to try to get back into the playoffs.
So if this team's winning, that means in my mind that Julio's running hot and is going to be uh, a key figure in the MVP race.
I like it. I like it a lot.
Kane, what is your third best case scenario?
You know, just like your first one about getting our hopes back up. Um, them actually making the playoffs and making a deep playoff run. I'm not saying that this is a World Series run. Like, if they make it to the championship, that's also very sick. Uh, but I think as fans, we need them to make the playoffs and we need them to make that run because it's just all hope is lost right now. And I think if they can put together a good season and make a somewhat deep run, that we're going to sit there and be like, okay, all right, we have hope again. We're going to see how the offseason plays out. Probably be miserable the whole time again, unless they're truly serious about pursuing guys and have more money or at least extensions on guys. But they need to make a deep playoff run this year. That is my best case scenario for this team is making a deep push. So, Coach Red, what's your final?
Mine's a riff off that about making that deep push and then having the front office and ownership lean into the success. Yes, you're going to have to start paying your own players. These younger guys, their contracts are going to start coming due if you want to keep them longer term, right? But make this an attractive place for a free agent to want to come because winning so like money is king to some guys, but also winning. You can see what's happening with the Dodgers right now in the bevy of players that they like. Teoscar coming back for them to do what they've done at with Roki Sasaki and then this slew of top
And
flight relievers. They want
mm,
to go play for a winner. And if you have that type of clubhouse, because I think clubhouse is going to be rocking.
oh, the
I
vibes
think
are
that's
so
going to be
back.
one of the selling points of this team. But if you also include on-field success and a deep playoff run, you're going to get some of those guys who are fringy that, maybe you're looking to make that one last run, like Paul Goldschmidt, that says, you know what? I want to go help the Mariners get over that hump. That's the biggest selling point that another big selling point I'd have to free agents and especially people is you can go to the Yankees, you can go to the Dodgers, you can go to the Braves. And if you win a championship there, you're just another guy that's done it. If you come here and are a key piece with us, you're the first. You are
Yeah.
You look at what I talked about, guys, earlier. We were talking about Ichiro. When you look at the feelings that this city has for Alvin Davis,
Yep.
for Ken Griffey Jr., for Jamie Moyer, for John Olerud, Jay Buhner. These guys weren't originally Mariners. They didn't come up in the Mariners systems. Felix Hernandez, Ichiro, Kyle Seager, Mitch Haniger, the guys
Right.
that you're already starting to see in Julio, even though half of Twitter hates him every other day, and Cal Raleigh, which all of Twitter loves.
Yeah, who everybody should love Big Dumper.
But
He
when
brings
you look at
our
this,
fandom together.
make that play because you look at how invested we are in those guys. And some of those guys, like Kyle Seager, like Nelson Cruz, like Felix Hernandez, when they were at the Mariners, they didn't make the playoffs.
But they are fan favorites for life.
And think about being one of the key pieces to win the first World Series,
You're immortalized.
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 And the fans, especially here, I would say, are a lot like elephants. We've got really good memories. And we'll remember it for a long, 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 long time.
Yeah, I think one World Series win, you can go 5 years without making it back or anything like that. It's gonna sting.
If the Mariners win the World Series, I'm going to be pretty upset if they don't make it back for 5 years. I have already endured a 21-year drought. I can't do that again. I'll be too old.
What do you mean? You already are old.
Yeah, I'll be too old, is what I said. But if you're young or you're old, it doesn't matter. You can just follow us on social media. It doesn't matter your age. You can do it. You can find me, your
Just
boy,
do
Coach
it.
Red, on X at the real Coach Red, on Instagram at the real underscore Coach Red,
Oh,
TikTok at the real Coach Red. Also find the show over on YouTube. Search Kicking It with Coach Red. Like, subscribe, hit the bell notifications, and leave a comment or two. Kane, where you at?
find me over on Twitter, K2406, TikTok, K0624. Also follow the show's socials over on Twitter and Instagram at Coach Red Pod. Follow us, follow us, follow us. Do it, freaking do it.
And as always, stay fresh.
Stay fresh, peeps.
Peace.